5-year-old Mimi loves to talk. She loves to talk with her parents. She can do it all day long. Now she also talks. She has come across a Kabuli wala, Rehmat, who has come all the way to Afghanistan, and he gives Mini cashews and kishmish. They develop a father-daughter like relationship which flourishes over the years. And this is reminiscent of his relationship over the airy hills of Afghanistan, which Rehmat has with his daughter. But unfortunately, due to unfortunate circumstances, Rehmat has to go to jail. And by 20 years, when he comes back, when he is finally gets the taste of freedom, it's Minnie's wedding day, and Minnie unfortunately cannot recognize after all the changes that Rehmat has gone through. Good afternoon, everyone. What short story, the gist of the short story that I have narrated to you, this is an excerpt from the short story from our very own Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore, who wrote this famous short story known as Kabuliwala. So today, of course, I've talked about Kabuliwala. We had been discussing the proper noun, which is on everyone's tongue these days, is Taliban. We're not talking about Afghanistan. Why? Just Taliban. Okay. Taliban's commander is swinging from a chopper, and they're having fun. They are massacring people. They are shooting people. They are conducting public hangings, and they have reinforced hijab. And although ostentatiously they are willing to support women's education, and they want to they want to support trade with India, but unfortunately I have to say that all these are just words in thin air. Ultimately, Taliban has returned, and obviously it is seeking the revenge of so-called oppression which it has faced over the years from various US forces, NATO forces, ISAF forces. And what now you might ask, I usually teach geography, so what prompted me to take this topic? Well, the answer is simple. Not only is this going to help me expand my dimensions, expand my perspective, because many things which I am going to show in today's presentation, I have not, there's many things I didn't know. I have tried to research as much as possible, tried to grasp as much facts and concepts as possible. It's not just about the rise of Taliban. It is about people. It is about culture. It is about economy. It is about history, various things. It can be long lecture, maybe it will be. So I want you to keep an open mind and try to enjoy it as much as possible, and I guarantee you that you will certainly gain a different perspective, different viewpoint of looking at Afghanistan, and not just staring or glaring at it for its mishaps and catastrophes that the Taliban has inflicted upon it. And mind you, this today's presentation is not just for UPSC aspirants, not just for competitive exams. It is going to cover a much wider aspect. It is going to span various dimensions. I've tried to make it as comprehensive but at the same time as concise as possible, so you are not bored out of your wits. But even kids and even elderly people, they can all tune into this lecture, and they can certainly gain out of it and enjoy it. And a lot of things I've tried in this presentation. So we'll move along and you will get to know what exactly I'm talking about, or what different things I'm doing in today's presentation. This is Afghanistan. Certainly a slight bit of geography. Again, this is what you need to know about Afghanistan. Pardon me for this Indian border, because normally this map, most of the maps or editable maps found online, they actually show the status quo and not what the official boundaries or what India's status, India's claims or India's official status they determine. Kashmir belongs with us, and no matter what POK, what Pakistan says, what Aksai Chin or the Chinese dragon say, this is not the complete picture. We'll be discussing this somewhat in detail in this lecture also. But this is Afghanistan. If you can just see the boundaries, it is very visible. We'll be discussing the neighbors also. This I have just given a heading. It is a landlocked country, first of all. There is no water body surrounding it. So entirely for the trade routes. So these days the transshipment routes, the cargoes, they need a water body or a waterway to conduct trade with different other nations or different other countries all over the world. But see, this is the Arabian Sea, this is the Bay of Bengal. But this country, in order to move its goods to other countries, this has to rely on its neighbors. So India has been helping, Pakistan helps whenever it wants, other nations are Iran. So basically these icons which I have used, these are not random. This is also a source of information. Everything has a meaning, every subheading, every heading, every line. For you can see, it is landlocked but flooded by fear, debilitated by gun-toting despots, laid to shambles, a victory hard fought. This has meaning. Debilitated. It has been shackled. It has been crumpled. It has been shredded by gun-toting despots. All the Taliban knows is to the power of the gun. Remove the gun from their hands, remove their so-called unity, and they will kneel to the greater good of the society. Then the victory hard fought here means that till 2020 or 2021, before the US forces decided to retreat, it was a sort of a victory. We were on the rebuilding, we were on the path of rebuilding Afghanistan for the greater good of not only Afghanistan's people but for the entire world. Then this symbol, this is the Afghanistan flag. This symbol is of Afghan currency, Afghani. This is a symbol of the minaret of Jam, which is an archaeological sculpture in the Ghor province of Afghanistan, an important landmark. And this is a symbol of the mosque at Kabul, which is the capital of Afghanistan. So in one slide, so much minimalist slide, so much information, so much knowledge. Then accordingly, we have discussed the basic precise location of Afghanistan. Now other things which need to be kept in mind is, it's not just any country, any location, any region in the world is not only influenced by its own culture, it is not only influenced by Taliban, but as we'll be discussing further as we progress along in this presentation, it is vastly, majorly affected by its neighbors, immediate neighbors as well. Although Uncle Sam or Soviet Union, when we'll discuss the invasions and how the Taliban came to its beginnings, how the origin of the Taliban took place. So in this slide, basically, you might be thinking what this clutter is, but like in every presentation, in every lecture, everything has a purpose. Every little icon that I place in the slide has a purpose, and this is basically, as you can see, love thy neighbor. Although neighbors, as far as countries or sovereign nations goes, there are a lot of tussles and arguments, so there is actually no love lost between them, just like between India and China or India and Pakistan. Anyways, basically this was the basic uh, location, the precise location of Afghanistan. And in this slide we'll be looking at the different neighbors, which is not only important for the UPS for the preparation of examinations, competitive examinations, but in general when we are exploring the world, we need to know what is happening in and around. It's This portion is Central Asia. What is Central Asia? What is West Asia? What is Southeast Asia? What is South Asia? Whenever we come across these terms in news, we don't feel like reading it. Why? Because we don't know the geography, the locations, and the references from the point of view of the West, or the point of view of Indians, or the point of view of Japanese, how the locations are being defined. So basically, Afghanistan here, it is first adjacent to the country is our friendly neighborhood Pakistan, and there is our friendly neighborhood again, and we have China. Again, these icons, since Pakistan is again defined majorly by terrorism, so that is there. And now second, this is the Pakistani flag, and this icon I have just posted here because there are some significant landmarks as well, because it's more than just about terrorism. Every nation has civilians or population that are not indulged in anti-national activities. So this is an icon of the Badshahi Mosque, which is a famous mosque in Pakistan. And this is of course China, the Chinese flag, the Great Wall of China. This is the famous lion dance, and of course coronavirus isolation. This is our very own prestigious nation. We have the India Gate, the Indian flag, Taj Mahal. This is Sitar, and this is the much overlooked famous landmark, that is Lotus Temple, which corresponds to the Baha'i faith. And these 5 to 6 icons, these cannot define our country. There's so much diversity, so much culture, so many religions, so many languages. Basically, since we are discussing the nature is of this topic strictly is confined to the neighbors, so will be. So apart from this, why I said India as a neighbor to Afghanistan, because although here Pakistan, as I said, and the online maps, the actual status quo or the de facto position is shown. But if we consider, and we should consider, Kashmir as an integral part of India, a small portion of what is known as the Wakhan corridor in Afghanistan, it shares its boundary with India. Now, in the west, towards the west of Afghanistan, we have Iran. This is the Iranian flag. This is a symbol of Faravar, which is an indication of one of Iran's religion, that is Zoroastrianism. This is the symbol of Iran's currency, that is Riyal. Then on top of that, we have Turkmenistan. This is the Turkmenistan flag. This is one of the most famous mosques that is at its capitals I'll be discussing. This is Uzbekistan, this flag. And this card, just for information, just for a fun fact, I came across a fact that the Chevrolet, that is from General Motors, American company, it has a monopoly in Afghanistan. So the people have to mostly purchase if they don't want to empty their pockets, they don't want to create a hole in their pockets. So although the all the GM companies, Chevrolet and other Ford Motors, they are shelving their operations and leaving many people unemployed in India. But they have their revenues, they have their means of making profit anyways. Then here we come towards the east, we have Tajikistan. This is the flag of Tajikistan, and this is the Hisor Castle, one of the famous monuments in Tajikistan. So these are the basic neighbors which share the boundary with Afghanistan. At top, if we consider, we have Kyrgyzstan, and further away we have Kazakhstan. Now, if we come to the important capitals, just fun for the kids or even all those who want to know, we know the capital of these countries: Afghanistan, Kabul. Then Iran is Tehran. This is Turkmenistan. Its capital is Ashgabat. For the UPSC aspirants or general, also the Ashgabat Agreement. It's a recent important point for current affair. It is a fodder for current affairs. It is related with the international north-south transport corridor, in which India is also related. This Uzbekistan, the capital is Tashkent. If we go back to history, in 1965, the famous or the infamous, a lot of casualties were there. The Indo-Pak War was there. In 1966, a Tashkent agreement. Tashkent is the capital of Uzbekistan, and there our then Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri signed an agreement for the war to end with the Pakistani president at that time, Ayub Khan. So that is why it is important. Then we come to Tajikistan. The capital of Tajikistan is Dushanbe, and here Kyrgyzstan, the capital is Bishkek, and Kazakhstan, the capital is Noor Sultan. Just for information, and you see this little icons of a treadmill. So that exactly also has a purpose. I'm not just put it randomly. There are various military exercises or training exercises in which India and other countries are involved. So from the Indian point of view, for example, 2 or 3 days prior to that, India showcased its blistering ballistic and military capabilities in a training exercise in Nizhny Novgorod in Russia on the invitation of Vladimir Putin. known as Zapad 2021. So these become very important for the points from the point of competitive examinations. Now, if we consider the static which take the exercises which take place on a regular basis, we can see with Uzbekistan we have India exercise which is known as Dustlik. And with Kazakhstan, we have an exercise known as military training exercise known as Prabal Dostyak. And with Kyrgyzstan, we have an exercise Khanjar. So some dangerous names might be involved, but not to worry about that. So this is basically the structure of the surroundings, the milieu, the environment, and this structure is also important because as we progress in this presentation, in today's presentation, we'll come to know how these neighbors come to play in the economy, in the culture, the interference, the support, the goods and supply which take place in and around this landlocked country. Okay, this is a slide, this is a basic infographic, a brief infographic which I could find. I could not recreate it because of lack of time and the text might not be visible, but I'll explain to you the important things which are of importance. So this is basically Afghanistan, some of the important places. This place is Kabul, this is the center, this capital, the cultural, economic, administrative center of Afghanistan. It makes up about 13% of the total population and half of the urban population of Afghanistan. Then this is a province around here which is known as the Helmand province. It is famous, or we can say infamous, for the production of opium. Till recent years, the main source of revenue for Afghanistan's economy had been opium, or which we called Hafim, the poppy fields, poppy cultivation. Then you might have heard of Herat province. Herat is important from the point of view of India. Also, some projects are there which we will be discussing in later. This is the Amu Darya, one important river which comes from Turkmenistan. Then we have the Harirud river which goes to Iran and Turkmenistan. We have the Helmand river. We have the Durand line, which is a bone of contention. This is the Durand line which forms majorly the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And it is bone of contention because, as always, British have a habit of marking boundaries in haste and just leaving. Similarly, with what they did with the demarcation of the Radcliffe line between Pakistan and India, and also the McMahon line, which has caused a lot of issues between India and China. Then this is the Kabul River. Kabul River, this goes to Pakistan and it is a tributary of River Indus. This is Jalalabad. This mountain, there's a mountain range here in between which sort of divides Afghanistan into two parts, north and south. This is known as the Hindu Kush. The topmost or the highest peak of these mountains is the Noshak. Then this region bordering Pakistan is famous for talc mining, and talc is used for various things from cosmetics to paints, and it is also an important source of revenue over the years for Taliban. And this tiny strip of land is known as the Wakhan corridor. At its thinnest, at its least thickness, it is only 9 miles wide, and it is a part of the Badakhshan province, and it borders the China and of course Pakistan, and this has also been a focal point of various small uprisings, and also it consists of the important focal points, important trade routes. The Silk Route, which existed in the ancient era, it used to pass through this area, and it served as an important nodal point for the trade of goods through Afghanistan. So this is the basic infographic, and This conflict timeline we'll be discussing in detail as we progress. This is an important part. This, if it is visible to you, this is the golden crescent. As we know, we have discussed that the opium cultivation takes place here, but combined with Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan, there is something known as the golden crescent. Why golden crescent? Because it is an area comprising of major drug trade. And since Pakistan has a border with India, you might all have seen the movie, much acclaimed movie, Udta Punjab, starring Shahid Kapoor. It was all about the drug menace in the Punjab region, which borders Pakistan. And that drug, this golden crescent and this illegal smuggling of drugs was the center point. And why I can relate to that is because my late brother also helped in rehabilitation of some of the drug addicts in Punjab. Similarly, India is not only affected by the golden crescent, but it is also affected by the golden triangle. Golden triangle consists of again three countries: Myanmar, Thailand, and Laos. It is also an area comprising of, it is greatly influenced by the drug trade. So both the sides with between, and Bangladesh also comes in between, and this region has porous borders with India. Henceforth, it is easy to smuggle drugs between the different countries. So this is one of the banes or one of the troubles that afflicts our great nation. Like I said, we are not only going to discuss about the Taliban, we are going to discuss a little bit about history. This lecture or this topic can go on and on, but my focus, my target is to keep it in a structured manner and as brief as possible, but at the same time enough content so you can relate and finally find yourselves willing to go back to school, pick up your history books and study what amazes you, what should amaze you, what should entice you, what amazing facts exist about the Afghanistan and its history, its people and its cultures. So basically, this is prehistoric. Prehistoric means even before the ancient era. The prehistoric means the Stone Age. So when we talk about Afghanistan, we not only talk about opium or we don't talk about war and the ravaged barren lands. Old Stone Age. So like various civilizations, we have the Indus Valley civilizations, which effectively you can see, we have observed the borders. It connects the Indian Indian India with Afghanistan, and it has various sites. Again, the various ancient civilizations, if you observe with context, with respect to the rivers, they are at or around the major river valleys, because that became the source of agriculture, sedentary herding. Herding gave way to agriculture and settled cultivation. These allowed people to settle and build cities all around. Similarly, Mesopotamia, you might have heard, this is a region around the Tigris and Euphrates region, present day. It comprises present day Iraq and some other countries. This is the Egyptian civilization around the Nile River. This is the Chinese civilization along the Huanghe and the Changjiang rivers. So all these civilizations which we read about so often, they have been around the river valleys. So Paleolithic people means old Stone Age. It has been, great evidence has been found in Afghanistan for which reminisce or which from which we can recollect their significance. And the earliest human occupation, the Neanderthal. Neanderthal means the early Stone Age man, the ancient man. It has been found in the cave of Darai Kur in Badakhshan, and some Mousterian type tools were. Badakhshan we have discussed, where it is in present day Afghanistan, as early as 100,000 years ago. So we can see what culture, what tradition, what the dwellings, they go back a long time. Then there was trade with Bronze Age. After Stone Age, we had the Bronze Age, that is the Mesopotamia and Egypt. And Afghanistan is basically famous for one of its minerals or materials which is known as lapis lazuli. This is just a sculpture made from a stone known as lapis lazuli. Afghanistan was quite famous for its export. Then, in addition, a site with definite links to civilization has excavated Shortugai near the Amu Darya. This is the Amu Darya river, which we discussed, going towards Turkmenistan, and there has been Shortugai is also, it lies pretty close to the Indus Valley civilization. Also, it has been a part of the past. Then we have the New Stone Age. We have caves near places known as Ak Kopruk, the Neolithic, the New Stone Age, and it ranges both before and after the Indus civilization of the 3rd to 2nd millennium BC, that is 3000 to 2000 BC. BC, why we normally we say that the year ranges from 2000, just if you don't know, but here we are going from back to front. This age 3000 BC is denotes a period which is earlier than 2000 BC, and this coincides with the time of the existence and predominance of the flourishing of the Indus Valley civilization. Similarly, we have even that in these times, 3000 BC also, there was used to be a lot of trade between various regions. The country's borders as such did not exist officially at that time, but various sea routes which have been mentioned here to the Persian Gulf, across Tigris Euphrates, Anatolia, this is Turkey, present day Turkey, this is the Balkh Badakhshan, this is the Iranian plateau, then this is Ur, a place. Then so many materials were there: gold, silver, carnelian, lapis lazuli, we have discussed, copper, alabaster, steatite, bitumen, shell. All these, it was so rich. The export and trade was so rich. Next, we come to the proper historical beginning. Some, if you are still in school, 6th, 7th standard, you might be reading, or if you are out of school, graduation, you can spend some time, especially engineers like me. You can devote some time, gain something from your history NCRTs. So basically, the important highlights I mentioned, not the entire history. So we have the Achaemenids and the Greeks. If you have seen the movie Troy starring Brad Pitt, it has several references of Achaemenids and Greeks. And even if you have seen the movie 300, which talks about Sparta, it has a lot of references to the wars and a lot of geography and historical beginnings there. So basically, 6th century BC. In the last slide, we were till 2000 BC, Indus Valley civilization. Now we have jumped, we have fast forward to 6th century, which denotes the 500 BC. 6th century is, for example, 21st century will be from 2000 till 2100, not from 2100 to 2200. From 2100 to 2200 will be the 22nd century. So 500 BC, Achaemenian ruler, these were just dynasties or kingdoms or combination of various people. He established his authority over the Afghanistan, present-day Afghanistan area. Then came Darius I, who established Achaemenian rule. Then there were a lot of provinces. At that time, they were known as satrapies. They were known by different names because the present-day names, they came much later. For example, Arya, this is modern-day Herat, Bactria, not bacteria, Balkh. Then Satgadia, modern-day Ghazni. Then Arcosia, Kandahar, Daragania, Sistan. Then Alexander the Great overthrew the Achaemenids and conquered most before he left for India, 327 BC. But of course, he could not do much plundering in India. He and his soldiers, there is a long history, debatable history, which you can read also. He could not effectively transcend or cross the Indus River, which was a major obstacles. So after the Achaemenids, they came the Greeks. This is again, everything has meaning. This is the symbol of the Greek god Apollo. So I have just tried to make things interesting. Some of the places which I have mentioned, they can be observed. This is the Bactria. and this is Arcosia, this is Gandhar, this is the Hindu Kush mountains which we have discussed initially. Then this is the Kashgar, Farghana. Farghana is a place which from which Babur came to India. We will be discussing that. Then Seleucid dynasty. Seleucid dynasty after Alexander's death in 323 BC, the Seleucid dynasty it started ruling from the current day place which is encompasses the country of Iraq. This you have must have heard. This is the Tower of Babel. The region surrounding Iraq, in and around and about Iraq, that was known as Babylon in that at that time, and the eastern satrapies after Alexander, the satrapies or the provinces which were under Alexander's rule and before Alexander over the Achaemenids' rule, they passed to the Seleucid dynasty, which ruled from Babylon, that is around Iraq, present day Iraq. Then in 304 BC, the south of Hindu Kush was ceded to the Mauryan dynasty. Mauryan dynasty, you all know about Chandragupta Maurya, and then came Ashoka. Then we have the Greco-Bactrian conquerors. They moved south after the Mauryan dynasty and established their rule at Kabul in the Punjab. Then there were other persons, other groups of people, or other rulers, other kingdoms, like the Achaemenids and the Greeks. There were the Parthians and the Scythians also, which came towards India and established various kingdoms here, and they gained control from the Seleucids and they established a lot of control over a lot of part of present day Afghanistan. Then you might also have heard of the Kushans. They were patronizers of Buddhism, and they have been associated extravagantly with Buddhism, and it was a loose confederation of 5 Central Asian nomadic tribes known as the UAZ, and these tribes united under Kushan province. And the highlight or the zenith of the Kushan period was reached under King Kanishk, which you might have heard often. It is from 78 to 144 CE. Now we have from BC, we have crossed the threshold, the zero, that is the Christ, and we have gone into the CE. Then his empire stretched from Mathura in north central India beyond Bactria as frontiers. So this is basically the Kushan Empire, which is extending from as far as Mathura to all the way through Kucha, Turfan, China, and Bactrian provinces. So Kushan's province was there, and they facilitated the exchange of ideas between Rome, India, and China. And pilgrims traveling through the Kushan Empire, they took Buddhism to various other regions, including the present day China. Again, there is a lot of variation in the same Buddhism also. There is Mahayana, Hinayana, and Theravada Buddhism. These are out of the scope of today's discussion. Then we have already talked about the Silk Road, the Gandhara art. Gandhara art flourished, which was the Buddhist sculpture art related to that period. And there is a present day province in Afghanistan known as Bamia. This is an example of Bamia where a lot of Buddhist statues were established, and unfortunately they were demolished or they were vandalized by Taliban. This is an example of Buddhist statue from the Kabul Museum. And the Buddhism was introduced to China, and the world's largest Buddha figures. See the gigantic scope of these sculptures. This is 175 feet and 120 feet tall. They were carved into a cliff at Bamia. So this was then destroyed by Taliban in 2001. But you can see how rich, again I'm emphasizing how rich the culture has been. Next we come to a brief picture of medieval history. Since a lot of movies, present day movies have been made. So first of all, we have the spread of Islamic conquest. One thing to note: this slide of presentation is not associated with any kind of religious overtones. I'm just stating the facts and to the best of my knowledge, and I'm just stating the facts as it is and the progress of the different civilizations. So basically, the Arab Muslim, they brought Islam to Herat and Zaranj in present day Afghanistan, and some of the inhabitants accepted. But before Islam, there were people following other types of religion also: Hindus, Buddhists, Zoroastrians, and Surya and Nana worshippers, Zeus. And basically, we had discussed the Seleucid dynasty, Seleucid rule. After Seleucids, we have the Safarid rule. So this boundary in orange, they denote the present day boundaries, the boundaries of present day sovereign nations. But this part in blue, this is the Safarid dynasty rule, the Iranian, from the Iranian. Then we Safarid Muslims, they later, after Safarids, there were the Samanids, which extended their uh, Islamic influence south of the Hindu Kush. We had discussed over here. So that is why the Safarids, and then the Samanids. Then, but the important thing is Muslims and non-Muslims still lived side by side in Kabul until the ascent of Ghaznavids in the 10th century, that is from 900 CE to 1000 CE. Then the Islamic conquest, the Mahmud Ghazni. So Mahmud Ghazni defeated remaining Hindu rulers and effectively Islamized the wider region with the exception of Kafiristan. Kafiristan was also a region at that time known. Then some of the famous historians you might have heard about, that is Al-Baruni and Firdausi. Al-Baruni wrote Kitab al-Hind. So when Ghazni came to India, Al-Baruni was patronized and he wrote an account, the historical perspective economy, about people of India. Then another was Firdausi. Firdausi wrote Shahnama, which was dedicated to Ghazni himself. Then the Ghaznis, after the Ghaznis, they came Ghurids, whose architectural achievements include Minaret of Jam. This is the Minaret of Jam which we have discussed in the Ghor province of present day Afghanistan. And finally, the Ghurids. After Ghaznis came the Ghurids, and after Ghurids, the Khwarezmian dynasty came in 1215. So you can see how valiantly I have tried to organize it in a chronological manner. Although a lot of you might not find it very interesting, but it is a part of history. It needs to be known. Then we have the Mongols and the Babur. Genghis Khan, we normally, or according to the English spelling, it is, I say, Genghis Khan in 1219. His Mongol army, it overran all the. This is basically the Khwarezmani Empire, which came in after it overthrew the Ghurid Empire, and after that, from 1219, this entire pink region, this belonged to the Mongols. And Khwarezmian cities of Herat and Balkh were annihilated or destroyed by the Mongol army, and other was the Mongol rule continued with the Ilkhanate in northwest, while the Khalji dynasty administered the Afghan tribal areas south of the Hindu Kush. So if we observe the Hindu Kush, this is Kabul. So Hindu Kush, the south of the Hindu Kush was the Ghazni. This was the Khalji dynasty, which ruled Delhi also, and then until the invasion of Timur. Then the Timurid Empire was established in 1317. Then in early 16th century, that is around 1510 to 1520, Babur arrived from Fargana. Fargana we have already discussed. Fargana in Fargana. Then between 16th and 18th century, the Uzbek Khanate of Bukhara, Iranian Safavids, and Indian Mughals ruled parts of the present day Afghanistan territory. And during the medieval period, the northwest region was known as Khorasan. So initially also the people during that era, they did not use the word Afghanistan, they actually used the word Khorasan. So Khorasan, it was distinguished, it was considered separate from the south of the from the southern part, which was known as the Hindustan, that is south of the Indus River. Now we come to the modern history. So further interesting modern history it's from, again we jump fast forward to 1738. Nader Shah. Nader Shah and his forces captured Kandahar, which is also province in present day Afghanistan, and under him there was a person known as Durrani, Ahmad Shah Durrani. Ahmad Shah Durrani, better known as Ahmad Shah Abdali. He raided a lot of territories, not only Afghanistan but also India, Hindustan. At that time, there is a portrait of Abdali, and obviously there was recently a movie about. There was a battle of Panipat, much famed battle of Panipat in 1761 between Marathas and Ahmad Shah Abdali. There was a movie in which I think Arjun Kapoor, very poor performance. Anyways, so basically there is an image portrait of the Battle of Panipat in which the Marathas were routed. They were comprehensively defeated, and that marked the end of the Maratha consolidation power, and the disintegration of the Marathas started from there. And this paved the way for the British Empire to progress from the east. Earlier, their influence only consisted to the eastern regions of Bengal, and slowly after they realized they are cunning, as you all know, after the fall of the Maratha and after the retreat of Abdali, after some time, the British started expanding or marching towards with their aim of occupying the areas in and around Afghanistan. So after that, there were Afghan Sikh wars. So basically, there was a turbulent period after the Battle of Panipat, and Afghanistan had many temporary rulers until Dost Muhammad Khan declared himself Amir in 1823. Punjab and Kashmir were lost to Maharaja Ranjit Singh. He was a famous Sikh ruler until from 1738 onwards. He invaded Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We'll be discussing this territory, and he captured the city of Peshawar. And in 1837, there was a battle of Jamrud near the Khyber Pass, and although the Afghan army failed to capture the fort, but it killed the commander Hari Singh Nalwa, thus ending the Afghan Sikh wars. So after the Afghan Sikh wars and the and the Sikh rule was effectively wiped out from the Afghan region, the Afghan rulers of the Afghan amirs or the Afghan small kingdoms, they came into prominence in this area. Now we have already said that the British also had its aims to capture the major territory of Afghanistan. So in 1838, it sent an expeditionary force in Afghanistan and arrested Dost Muhammad and replaced him with previous ruler Shah Shuja. But the inhabitants or the citizens of the inhabitants of Afghanistan, they rose in a uprising, and finally wars took place in and around Kabul, and there was one famous English general, Elphinstone. I think there is an Elphinstone's bridge also, or road in Mumbai. Then the Dost Muhammad Khan was restored, and but in the second Anglo-Afghan war, you also have to realize at that time the present day Russia or the region in and around Russia was ruled by czars, the monarchical dynasty, which of its own had their own ambitions of conquering territories and expanding. So because of that SAR invention, the British, they decided to advance, and on that pretext of protecting their territories and Afghanistan from the SAR expansion, they engaged in the Second Anglo-Afghan War, and where to counter Russian influence, Abdur Rahman Khan was replaced by Ayub Khan, and the Britain gained control of Afghanistan's foreign relations. And this Treaty of Gandamak of 1879 is important. And finally, in 1893, Amir Abdur Rahman signed an agreement in which the territories were divided by the Durand Line, which forms the modern day boundary and the modern day bone of contention between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And then we have finally in 1919 we have the Emirate of Afghanistan, which was formed at the end of the third Anglo-Afghan War after the signing of Treaty of Rawalpindi in 1990, and Amir Amanullah Khan so declared Emirate of Afghanistan as a sovereign and independent state. And he moved to end his country's traditional isolation and started forming diplomatic ties with the Weimar Republic of Germany and the Soviet Union. At that time also, if you remember, the after the First World War, uh, the Germany was still divided. And this is just a picture denoting the extent of the Punjab province, the Punjab ruled areas. This is a picture of the Battle of Saragadi, which was recently in news. So now we come to a very interesting topic known as the Durand Line. We have time and again in through this presentation, we have discussed this bone of contention, this boundary which was marked when the Emirate of Afghanistan came into existence in 1990. Now, if you see the map, first of all, we'll discuss somewhat to give you a reference of what is POK and what is Aksai chain and how it is surrounded, how it is related to Afghanistan and its related and its surrounding areas. So basically, you can see this entire this entire boundary. This is this is the actual Kashmir that we say that we usually draw in India maps, not in the maps issued by other online organizations. This is the actual part of Kashmir, which has also been the recent redrawing of the boundaries, that is the Union territories of Jammu and Kashmir Jammu and Kashmir and the Union territory of Ladakh. They include all these areas, but status quo de facto, this area, this entire Jammu and Kashmir, this area is occupied by Chinese. This is known as Aksai chain, and this whole green area in 1948 it was occupied by the Pakistan tribal forces. This is effectively known as the POK, Pak Occupied Kashmir. So effectively, the de facto status is only this. We are left with this, and this boundary between POK and India, this is known as the line of control, while this boundary between Aksai chain between China and India is known as the line of LAC, the line of actual control. And this territory, this is Shaksgam Valley, which was given by Pakistan to China in 1963. So you can see how the two are very friendly, so-called friendly neighborhoods. They have been conniving and colluding with each other to cause havoc and wreck the sovereignty of our country. So basically now this POK has largely been divided into two areas. The southern area, The southern area is known as Azad Kashmir, while the northern area is known as the Gilgit-Baltistan area. So this is not exactly officially under the control of Pakistan, but nonetheless, the Pakistani military, Pakistani forces, they exercise control. And recently, 1 or 2 days ago, there was some unrest in the Azad Kashmir region, because obviously, when there is Pakistan involved, they are going to repress and oppress the people. They are not giving them rights, but they still claim that Kashmir should be ceded to them, but it's not going to happen. So this is you can say this is Srinagar here. So it is very close, and that is why the line of control, there are a lot of terrorist militant attacks in and around this region. And next you can see here, this is the rest of the Pakistan. So when we talk about, now we come to the bottom map. Now you can see here that here, if you see that this is Islamabad, here we have isolated Afghanistan and Pakistan. So this is effectively Islamabad. This whole region, this is so this whole region, this is a part of what was earlier known as the Northwest Frontier Province, NWFP. This is exactly this region, Northwest Frontier Province. This is part of this bottommost, if you join the various boundaries. Now recently, what they have done in 2018, this region, this is the Durand Line, and this region was earlier known as the FATA, or the federally administrated tribal areas of Pakistan. Here it is largely ethnically the group or the people, the ethnicity, they primarily consist of the Pashtuns, and this ethnicity issue is often raised by Pakistan in the international arena as a contest, in order to contest or challenge the authenticity of the Durand Line, because they say that this area around in Afghanistan also, majority of the people are Pashtuns, and this area also they are Pashtuns. So Pakistan says that this is unfair to them, and the Durand Line should be adjusted. And moreover, these Pashtuns being on both the sides, Pakistan plays proxy wars and placed the Pashtuns on both sides against each other and wages proxy wars and promotes terrorism. But in recently, what has happened is this all these areas in Northwest Frontier Province and this federally administrative tribal areas, they have been merged together to form Khyber, one province known as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which was earlier, this region was earlier ruled according to the rules of Pakhtunwali, but now all these areas have been merged into a single province, Pakistan province known as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. This is Balochistan, this is Sindh, this is Punjab, not of India but of Pakistan. So these major four provinces make up the entire Pakistan. Balochistan, why it is important? Because often Pakistan has criticized, or it has alleged that India is instigating the people of Balochistan to rise or create an uprising or rebellion against the Pakistan, which is ludicrous. Anyways, so I think you are now well versed with the basic what is the border and what and how is happening. it gives a much clearer picture. So again, the Durand Line, bone of contention, it is a border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Line established in 1893. It was reached in agreement Amir of Afghanistan, Abdur Rahman Khan, and it has been disputed with Pakistan, which became independent in 1947, and Afghanistan ever since. Then a breach, a little bit of history, which I have already discussed, but still, although the foreign policy of Afghanistan remained under mandate of British until 1990, the Amir exercised control over matters of national importance. British India, wary of Russian invasion into its most prized colony and suspicious of Pashtun support to SARS army from Russia, it hoped to employ its western neighbor as a buffer state. That is again one of the strategies. So what did was this whole Pakistan area, not the boundaries were not exactly as the present day, but this Pakistan already India was under British control most of the region, although there were princely states also. Then this Pakistan area, since they because of the failure of the Anglo-Afghan wars, they had to come to an agreement to form an emirate of Afghanistan, but nonetheless they used this they manipulated Afghanistan as a buffer area so as to prevent the SAR army to contest its claims or lay an eye over the British territory of India. So that is also an important part of history. Then there is an issue of ethnicity. Pakistan came into existence only in 1947, but like I said, this area, the area where the majority of the ethnicity belongs to Pashtuns, this was greatly contested. This was divided unevenly. Some Pashtun areas were lied with Pakistan, whereas other with, similar to the recently concluded conclave issue between West Bengal and Bangladesh. Assam areas were also included, and since 1904, NWFP, now called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, has enjoyed autonomy. But even after creation of Pakistan, the FATA, federally administrated tribal areas, continue to be governed in accordance with Pashtunwali until 2018, when it was merged with Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. But this region has become a safe haven for the Pakistani wing of Taliban, the TTP, or Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. So not only religions, not only ethnicities, not only people, even the Taliban has been divided into various factions. One of them is the Pakistani Taliban, that is Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Then one important, again, modern part of how it is connected with India, the NWFP. This region, NWFP, now called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, there was a very famous freedom fighter known as Khan, Abdul Ghaffar Khan. He fought for the rights of the people of the northwestern frontier province. He wanted to liberate the people there. For that reason, he was also incarcerated or imprisoned for long amount of time. What happened during the partition was NWFP was one of the areas or regions which was earlier under British India, which was given the option to join either with India or Pakistan. But unfortunately, or I don't know, it was according to people's wishes, majority, it wished to join with the present day Pakistan. So that is what it was created in 1947, and NWFP given the option to either remain in India or join newly created state of Pakistan. And we have Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, one of the famous leaders in the Indian National Congress, or erstwhile Indian National Congress, not today's. Then the conclusion is, because of all these factors, and now it has even been worsened or exacerbated by the withdrawal of the US, the NATO forces, ISAF. The problem is the Pakistani civil society is so riddled with disenchantment, and it has a lot of rifts. It is just enchanted with the government, the military. So a lot of rifts. Then we have terrorism, lot of things. Afghanistan is one of the country which every year ranks among the lowest countries in the Human Development Index. So no fanatical warlordism, rampant human trafficking, insurgency, All these things have led to Afghanistan economic deterioration. Obviously, if all the people are fighting amongst each other, and external state factors, they are also encouraging the destabilization of Afghanistan, like the country Pakistan. So Afghanistan ultimately cannot progress further. And there is a difference. You might have come across this word insurgency. Insurgency is different from terrorism. The main idea of terrorism, like literal meaning in layman terms, is to spread terror. They have a fixed or particular ideology, be it mostly on religious basis. So they conduct their operations, so-called operations, all over the world. They can go to France, they can go to New Zealand, they can go to US, everywhere. But their aim is not to topple. Ultimate aim is not to topple the government. Just they have they have convoluted they have a convoluted concept of jihad, and they say that whatever they are doing, the terror spread they are doing, in case as a result or as a counter to the forces which are trying to so-called destroy Islam. But that is not the case. On the other hand, insurgency like Taliban, the Taliban are not only, their main aim is not to or not only to spread terror, but to overthrow the existing government. That is what they have done or have been doing since in the past also. The established sense of government, whatever government was under Ashraf Ghani, or earlier under Hamid Karzai, the Taliban's aim is to overthrow them and to establish their own rules, their own version of Islamic law, which the interpretation of which is very different from what Prophet Muhammad he proclaimed, or the Quran says. Basically, if we know the word jihad, jihad in Prophet Muhammad's words also, or the good or the sane or the wise religious scholars, jihad means that is the liberation or the fight to find the inner spiritual self of a particular person who follows the Islamic religion. But these have these entities such as Taliban and terrorists and all these mujahideens, they have convoluted, they have distorted this actual meaning of jihad, and they said that jihad is all about defending Islam from all the so-called forces that are trying to allegedly suppress it. So that is the main problem. Religion is not the actual problem here. The interpretation which these misguided and brainwashed people have used. So now we are into the one of the main dimensions. So say till now, we have reached fast forwarded to 1978. Now, if some of you recollect or some of you have studied that after the Second World War, two poles basically were established. One was the Soviet Union, USSR, and one was the USA. These two, they had in layman terms, two different and contrasting ideologies. One was with capitalism, and one was with the communism, that is USSR. So they both came to be called as superpowers because they developed nuclear weapons, they indulged in arms race, they developed a lot of research in science, they send their rockets and satellites into space. So why it was known as the Cold War and not the actual war? Because there was no actual conflict. They developed nuclear weapons, but they did not fire it upon each other because it also served as a deterrent. Because once the nuclear weapon, if one had started, if one had launched it over the other country, then there would have been a retaliation, and it would have been it would have been a negative sum game. Both, every country, not only USA or USSR, had everything to lose if they indulge in a hot war, we can say. So there, that is why that is known as a Cold War. But nonetheless, by various strategies, by various interventions, for example, the Vietnam War, which USA and USSR, the Afghan War, both the countries trying to establish their influence, they tried to establish their own puppet leaders to propagate their philosophy or ideology of communism. And whenever America or US, it saw Soviet Union or USSR as a threat to a particular region, it straight away intervened. It didn't have any second thoughts. All this reason is the root. It is the root of the conflict of the present situation of Afghanistan. These countries, out of some of these countries, out of their own selfish interest, they have caused the devastation in some of the countries which were supposedly good, and the people were happy if they were left alone. But no. So in April 1978, the left-wing military officers led by Noor Mohammad Taraki, they seized power in a bloody coup d'etat in from President Mohammad Daoud Khan. So everything was going more or less normal. He was centrist. He was leader of the centrist People Democratic Party, but due to Russian influence, some of the people, some of the leaders in Afghanistan with a Soviet ideology which was inserted in them, they overthrew them and seized power. And Soviet influence came into play. But before even the entry of US or Uncle Sam, the people, the devout Islamic people who had their own, who wanted to, who didn't want to give up their independence, who want to live with freedom and liberty, who wanted to follow their own peaceful lives with their own custom and traditions, they initially started opposing. So that is the anti-communist population. They resented the communist rule which was propagated by Noor Mohammad Taraki in Afghanistan. And insurgencies arose against this government among both tribal and urban groups, and these collectively were known as the Mujahideen, who were basically Islamic in orientation. Now, here is where the terrorist aspect, the insurgent aspect, or the debilitating aspect of the Mujahideen, of the actual philosophy of the jihad, which is not actually war, the defense against Islam, it started becoming distorted and convoluted, and it became all about arms and ammunition war and all that. So these uprisings, this led to the actual Soviet invasion. Earlier, Soviet influence was there among the Afghan leaders such as Noor Mohammad Taraki, but actual when the uprising started, and these native leaders, so native leaders following the Soviet philosophy, they were not able to tackle or deal with the problem of these internal uprisings. The Soviet Union finally invaded the country in December 1979. And next, here comes Uncle Sam. So, like I said, the Soviet had found another safe haven. It was trying to influence Afghanistan, and it had invaded Afghanistan. So obviously, it came. It was no surprise that it came as a threat to Uncle Sam or United States. So the Afghan war, although it settled down into a stalemate, with 100,000 Soviet troops controlling the cities. This is an example of Soviet tank which was used during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. But what happened is indiscreetly or discreetly, I might say, the US, the Pakistan, and other non-state actors, they started equipping or arming the Mujahideen and the tribal people who were opposed to Soviet invasion and the Soviet philosophy or communism with arms and ammunition. So various tactics were used, and the ultimately again, the since the Mujahideen had retaliated with help from US and Pakistan and other actors, and the Soviets also, they retaliated and they started bombing and depopulating the rural areas which were considered a threat to their invasion or rule. And again, a lot of Afghans, some 2.8 million Afghans had sought asylum in Pakistan, and another 1.5 million had fled to Iran. So, by no mistake of their own, and by the coming of these foreign nations, Afghanistan as a nation started to get crippled. And again, since the Mujahideen were being equipped with the modern arms and ammunition, they were able to neutralize the Soviet air power through the use of shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missile. So not only just arms, not just only rifles or guns, shoulder-mounted anti-aircraft missiles. So what happened is, although after the some stalemate or some agreement was reached between, after so much devastation, so much destruction was caused, the US in 1988, US, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Soviet Union, they signed an agreement in which, according to which the Soviets, they withdrew their troops from Afghanistan, and Afghanistan, it receded back to its non-aligned status. So Mujahideen also were fragmented initially politically because there were a lot of factions also, but they now had control over the arms. So they were fragmented, and as soon as the world expected the situation to improve, it was not going to be so, because the Pakistan and the people from other Muslim Islamic nations, they continue to support the Mujahideen cause, the Afghan cause, and the quality of their arms and combat operations organizations gradually improved. And so we'll start moving to the progress, the next. A brief explanation by this chart of the various philosophies. Normally we talk about that there is just interpretation. I'm not impinging or challenging the actual philosophy. We say that the communist parties are left, the Congress is left of center, or the BJP is right of center. Some say the RSS is far right. So what does that mean, left, right? And so it is not, in layman terms, all these philosophies, political ideologies and philosophies, they are overlapping in nature. The line of difference, there is a very thin line between any two, even two political ideologies, and this has not been my interpretation. It is from what I have read. So in layman terms, I have prepared this quadrant. So on the x-axis, we have the extremes left and right. In layman terms, left means it is all about welfare of the people. That is, roti, kapda and makan, they have to be provided to the people by the state. The state has to engage in all kind of welfare activities, the medical care, the economy, the income, the money, the state has to provide. In the far right, if we go in layman terms, it is denoted by not only free market economy, but also profit oriented, business oriented. That is philosophy which we can say, to each unto his own. The more business one does, or the more one progresses, he is entitled to that money. So these are extreme philosophies. No one party or no one particular ideology can be extreme left or right. That cannot exist. And over the y-axis, I have extreme authority, which is again complete dictatorship. There is no freedom of speech. The state is prominent, the government, it strictly forbids people to for against dissent, and it does not allow the people to fight for their rights. And again, at the extreme end of the y-axis down, we have the liberty, where there is no government control, people are free to do whatever they want. So these are four extremes which in actual life cannot exist, because no civilized society will exist at that time. So if we have to discuss the philosophies according to various regions and what is happening, if we have to categorize even one party or one country according to left and right, various other political ideologies have been derived from these four major terms. So one is this communist philosophy, which was philosophy of Mao's China and during the time of Stalin's Soviet Union. So communism, if you can see clearly, it is towards the left and it is towards the top right. So it has large components of authority also and large components of leftism also. So the state owns the resources. Whatever we do, whatever the normal people do, the state owns the resources. Communism means the community owns the resources. But again, this when the state comes, the state controls the sources and it distributes to the community according to his whims and wishes. And authority, why authority? Because like Mao's China, and even today, when we observe China, it is a single party rule. So there is extreme authority over there. But we can see in today's China also, it is slowly opening up. It has opened up a lot. It is a focal point of center of trade, and so many countries have invested in the Chinese industries and factories. So over a time, it has come to light that even Soviet Union, which exhaustively practiced this communist philosophy, and even China, which was extensively, almost exclusively relying on this communist philosophy, it had to open up to the avenues of globalization and integration with the other economies or other major countries. Otherwise, it could not survive. So this is then at the other end we have fascism. Fascism closely related with Nazism. We normally during Hitler's Germany, or we associate it with Benito Mussolini's Italy. But if we have to observe a present day example, we can say take an example of Saudi Arabia. Now Saudi Arabia, it is towards the right because it is engaged with a lot of trade and business. It is one of the commercial hubs of the world, huge skyscrapers that cannot be built if the businesses are not progressing, or if the people are not making money. But still, monarchy, the kingdomship, all these exist. So there is no actual power or no absolute rights with the people. So authority, lot of authority is still there. So that is, we can say that Saudi Arabia sorts of fulfills the fascist philosophy. Then we have this democratic socialism. If you observe this icon here, this is the mask used in Kathakali, which is a classical dance of Kerala. Why I have used? Because in Kerala, the Communist Party of Kerala, it engages in a philosophy known as democratic socialism. So socialism, it is in this quadrant, which means it is slightly towards the left. It is engaging in the welfare, not exactly profit oriented, mainly welfare. Democratic socialism is because democracy is there, people's rights are there. So not exactly left or not exactly right, just slight left of center. But it is just a name. Don't think that if democratic word is attached to this philosophy, it does not mean that other philosophies like this neo-conservatism or free market liberalism, they don't have democracy. They are also democratic countries. When we come to free market liberalism, USA, the present day United States, is a great example because it is a liberal country. It is supporting the rights, it is supporting new innovations, new technologies, new evolution of traditions and rights, and it is also free market economy. And right on top of it, it is the United States of yesteryears. That is, we can say during the Taliban era, during the Vietnam era. Here, US had, during that time, used to adopt an interventionist policy. It was more of a traditional society. It was more oriented towards authority. That time also, because US had started its trade and it has started promoting globalization. It was the hubs of internationalization and globalization, integration with the world. So it was still towards the right. But now the present day US is more towards this. Then at the extremes, here we have libertarianism. Here you can see there is extreme liberty and it is towards the extreme right. So the people want to not only want to have freedom, they want to be free of the state influence. They want no state involvement at all. They want to be free. They want to pursue because in advanced countries like United States also, there are some regions or some provincial governments, state governments, which abhor or detest or they contest the philosophy or the so-called cult of LGBTQs, or they are anti abortion, and or they are devout Christians who don't want to proceed with the coming or the modern ages. So this, the counter to state, the state intervention is the libertarianism. At the same time, this is a philosophy known as anarchism, in which, like libertarianism, it does not want any state involvement, but it wants that the, since it is tilted towards the left, it wants that the resources should be owned by the community, there should be no state involved, and they should have complete liberty. So we have effectively discussed this welfare state liberalism. This is another type of philosophy which is a mixture of welfare state, both liberties and welfare state, the economies, and the caring for the people, the welfare of the people. No such particular example comes to my mind. And talking about the Indian political parties, again, this is not my point of view. The major view of political parties, we consider the Indian National Congress slightly left of center. During initial days of independence, initial years, of course, when we consider Nehru's Congress, at that time the people were not self capable and they had to be cared for. There was not much scope for industrialization because British did not leave any scope for industrialization. So we had to care for the agriculture, for the industry. State had to play a role in the welfare. So that is why in Nehru's Congress, we can say it was towards the left of center. Aam Aadmi Party also is said to be a further left of center, although I don't know, I don't want to get into this. As far as BJP is concerned, please pardon me if I am hurting anyone's political sentiments, but it is often said that the BJP during the time of Atal Bihari Vajpayee replicated this, was reminiscent of free market liberalism, because there was always a tilt towards right, but there was democracy and there was welfare. One thing we have to realize, that there is no exact capitalism and no exact communism which can sustain a particular economy or country. If we are tilting from the center towards the right, it does not mean that we are not working for the welfare of the people. The important thing to realize is, even if lot of industries, the stock market, the Sensex is rising, lot of companies are expanding and growing, the inequalities are increasing undoubtedly, but that money is also being taken as taxes in different slabs by the government, and that money is getting indulged or getting engaged, promoted to promote the welfare of the poor and the needy. So in that way also we can look at this. And more often, if there is no inequality, everyone is considered equal, then who will go and who will consider who will do your household work? How will there be any maids? Will there be any garbage collectors? The important point to know is that I'm not promoting or propagating inequality. I'm just saying that without inequality, there should not be high inequality, but extreme equality is also not possible. The country or economy cannot be sustained. Inequality is also perspective, is also subjective in terms. Although if a garbage collector, so-called jamadar, if he is collecting garbage, we should not detest his presence. We should not condescend him. We should not look down upon him. We should treat every individual as a human, even if he is engaging, even the maids, even the restaurant waiters, even if they're engaging in any low paid jobs, it is, we have no right to impinge upon their liberties or impinge upon their human rights. That is the important point. Again, if we come to conservatism, the BJP, today's BJP, it is often alleged that because although it is right oriented, various industrialist policies and all that are being promoted, economy is being promoted, but at the same time some of the measures, some of the highly controversial debatable measures like the ban on meat and liquor consumption, that gives it a conservative or traditional approach. Again, the point of view of scholars, that these philosophies or political ideologies are highly subjective in nature, and I would like to stay away from them as much as possible. So this is, I hope this was beneficial to you. So now again we come back to the main topic. We have discussed about the Soviet withdrawal earlier, but ultimately there is still presence of the Mujahideen. So after 1992, since we have discussed that the Mujahideen were fragmented, but they were heavily armed. But power, can power be shared? I don't think so. You arm everyone, you have given similar weapons. So different Mujahideen factions, they started vying for control over the main Afghanistan portion. So although transitional government was formed, but there was a president, Burhanuddin Rabbani, leader of the Islamic Society, a major Mujahideen group, who refused to leave office in accordance with the new transitional government agreement. And other Mujahideen groups, particularly the Islamic Party led by Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, which is also a prominent figure, they surrounded Kabul and they also wanted the power to themselves and started barraging the city with artillery and rockets, which had been provided by all these final state and non-state actors. Then now we come to the origin of Taliban. As a response, the Taliban in Pashtun language, Taliban means students. It was a puritanical again some time for some vocabulary. Puritanical means it is somewhat related to austerity, complete complete following or observing moral codes, like not like complete whatever the interpretation of Islamic law that they were subjected to. Then it was under Mr. Muhammad Omar, who we all know. Then they emerged in the fall of 1994 and they systematically seized power and occupied Kabul in 1996. And they were augmented by volunteers from various regions, and but soon control most of the portion. Taliban came to occupy most of the regions or most of the territory of Afghanistan, barring some regions, especially the Mujahideen forces known as the Northern Line. So, if you can see this chronological order, initially in 1992, there are a lot of Mujahideen groups which are spread across various parts. Then, in transitional government was not accepted, they all vied for power, but who came out on top? That is the Taliban under Muhammad Umar or Mullah Omar, and see this entire light green region is under. But other factions they combined together, a small faction. All these Mujahideen groups were eliminated, but this small red portion, this northeastern portion, this was known as the Northern Alliance. It was also Mujahideen group, but it was not with Taliban. Then after, at the end of 2001, the US, the NATO forces, they relied primarily with the contribution and support of the Northern Alliance to overthrow the Taliban. And in the end of 2001, we can see that this Northern Alliance is still there, and with the Northern Alliance help, the NATO forces, they expelled Taliban from here. This was another yellow group. Were occupied by tribes which were against Taliban, and Taliban was reduced to this region in and around Kandahar. And during this phase, this is unladening and unleashing cataclysm. During this phase, when the Taliban came to power, then came Osama uncle from Sudan. So he was welcomed with open arms to Afghanistan, and he established his headquarters in Afghanistan. And with Al Qaeda's help, the Taliban won control over 90% of Afghan territory by 2001. This image is end of 2001 when great action was taken. So now, the day that shook the earth, that is 9/11 and beyond, basically there were 4 flights which were hijacked. The fourth flight was somehow deviated from course by some valiant action. It did not cause much destruction, but the 3 flights the two of the one flight each, they collided each. They struck one of the one tower each, the twin towers, and one in the third flight it dropped over and demolished a part of the structure of the Pentagon. So World Trade Center structures in Lower Manhattan and the Pentagon in Arlington Country, Virginia. So there were 2977 fatalities, over 25,000 injuries, long-term health consequences, and at least $10 billion in infrastructure and property damage. So then we know that already Uncle Sam is used to intervening in other countries. Now it was certainly not going to hold back. Then established a master plan of the eradicating Al Qaeda and Taliban once and for all, and in association with the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, an operation known as Jawbreaker was formed, and they they relied, as we have discussed in the previous slide, they relied over the Northern Alliance, then other commanders, Tajik leader Mohammad Fahim, Abdul Rashid Dostum, an Uzbek, and also the anti-Taliban Pashtuns in southern Afghanistan, and a little known tribal leader named as Hamid Karzai, who later on moved on to become the president of the Afghanistan government when it finally got rid of the majority of Taliban. Then the operation was Enduring Freedom, and coordinated targeting for the air campaign began on October 2001 with both US and British warplanes pounding the Taliban targets, and Kandahar, the last city in the southern Afghanistan and one of the prominent strongholds of Taliban, it fell on December 6, marking the end of Taliban power. But still, there was the hunt for the big fish, the Osama uncle and his sidekick Mullah Omar, and uh, they came quite close. They came quite close to eliminating him in 2001, where he was residing, or rather hiding, in the Tora Bora mountains of Afghanistan. But somehow, uh, information was leaked. It was alleged that information was leaked, and they escaped to Pakistan. So in March, one of the final major battles of the first phase of war came in March 2002 with Operation Anaconda, in which involved US and Afghan forces fighting some 800 Al Qaeda and Taliban militants. So in between 2001 and 2011, until finally Osama uncle was killed, so there was a Marshall Plan declared by Bush. Of course, Uncle Sam has to remove the attention from all the atrocities and the rise of the Taliban, which it had caused. So it took out what is known as the Marshall Plan, which was sort of an aid plan and allowed $38 billion in humanitarian reconstruction assistance to Afghanistan between 2001 and 2009. But at the same time, its interest, because now there was no point in fighting the Soviet Union already, it had dissolved in 1990. So US started looking after its interests elsewhere, especially in Iraq. So a lot of its resources, instead of the ostentatious Marshall Plan, they were also deviated towards the Iraq and other places which it was interested in. And that is why more than half the money went to training and equipping Afghan security forces, and that is why the various welfare, or the basic welfare, the basic amenities which were to be provided to the Afghan people, that was not done. And that is why Afghanistan, time and again, every year the HDI, or the Human Development Index, which is established, it in that Afghanistan ranks pretty low. Then there was a resurgence of insurgency after 2001 because of the lack of interest with the US, and the other nations such as Norway and France had also started losing interest from and they were uh, they were retreating their forces from NATO. And again, over the next decade, ISAF and Afghan troops led many offensives. Again, ISAF was International Security Alliance Forces, which replaced NATO. NATO was earlier the initiator of the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, but after that, since NATO is a larger alliance of lot more countries, a smaller consolidated alliance known as the International Security Alliance Forces, they it was formed, which was equipped with the task, laden with the task of equipping Afghan forces, and but Afghanistan remained one of the poorest countries in the world because of lack of foreign investment, government corruption, and Taliban insurgency. Meanwhile, like I said, Hamid Karzai, who was earlier a little known, not widely known leader, tribal leader, he had come to power, he had become president, but it was also crippled or ravaged with corrupt practices, and that also created a lot of discontent among the Afghan people. But his government was able to adopt some of the reform measures, especially it adopted a constitution in 2004 with the name Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Then there was other sensational revelation, that is WikiLeaks. You might have heard of Mr. Julian Assange, who was the founder of WikiLeaks, and classified document in which it was said that not only the human rights are violated on large scale by the Afghan forces. There was a viral video in which Afghan soldiers were seen to be urinating on the Afghan people. So horrific killing of people, torturing women and children. All these came to light through these leaks. So all these were distributed to the New York Times, Der Spiegel, and the Guardian, and unreported civilian death. And Taliban had deployed heat-seeking missiles against aircraft, and Pakistan intelligence services, the ISI, had been working with Taliban forces in spite of substantial US aid to Pakistan. So you can Pakistan is always the hypocrite. It has no other thing to time pass. It does not care for its own people. Just it tries to engage in proxy wars because it knows if it is if it wages a large scale war over India or other country, it cannot win. So basically, whatever US aid, whatever the F-16 fighters the Pakistan has, it was basically provided by US in order to counter the Taliban Afghanistan forces. Now, what it is doing, it is entering Indian territory. It is these are being used to demonstrate their dominance or predominance in the area of military and air force. So all this is nonsense. Next, finally, 10 years after eluding the capture at Torabur in Afghanistan, Mr. Osama uncle was killed in Abbottabad in Pakistan. And of course, all these human rights violation, when it came to light, again, it enraged the normal people, the common people of Pakistan. And the when it was circulated in the media, it also persuaded, or it also forced the officials, US officials, to apologize on their behalf. And shooting of Afghans, and they broke into several homes. Then there was finally some sense of peace in September 2004. Ashraf Ghani became president. Currently, he has fled in because of the fear of Taliban. Of course, there's nothing else. If he will come across any Taliban leader, he'll be killed or maybe publicly hanged. So basically, NATO formally ended ISAF combat operations on 2014, and there was a document known as body count, which estimated that in 2015 about 1,47,000 people have been killed in Afghanistan war since 2001. More than 38,000 of those killed have been civilians, and it also concluded that 1,06,000 to 1,70,000 civilians had been killed as a result of the fighting in Afghanistan at hands of all parties to the conflict. So you can observe the mayhem, the catastrophe, the loss of not only property, loss of not only only Taliban. It's not about Taliban, it's the greater impact which it created over the society all over the world at large. The now and present, although it might not seem grammatically correct, but it is very important. The emphasis has to be there anyways. So in basic, Afghanistan has a population of 38 million. For we have already discussed the majority of the population, 13% of the population in Kabul. Now, as on 15th August, although I could not provide you with all the updates, it is a little bit painstaking. So don't kindly don't besiege me for not updating you the latest. But I tried to. So as on 15th August, this is an image from as 15th August, all these brown areas have been conquered by Afghanistan. So all these including cities of Mazar-e-Sharif, Jalalabad, Aibak, Kunduz, Phule, Kumri, Zaranj, Faizabad, Ghazni, all these have lost the control, have been under the control of the Taliban. Then all the supply routes and border crossing, and of course we have discussed that Afghanistan has depends upon other countries for their trade and supply because it is landlocked. So and the two South Asian countries, that is Pakistan, they share 2,600 kilometers border, and one of the crossings, Spin Boldak, is it has been under Taliban control since July. Now the valley of Panjshir around here, Valley of Panjshir, it was the last stronghold of the Afghanistan government. Now, as of say 6 September 2021, it has been in news. Taliban has claimed that it has also conquered that. So basically, it is a region in the Hindu Kush mountains, and there is a single entrance. It was used to counter Taliban in the past, and it was used to counter Taliban in the present also. But Taliban is huge in number, and they have a lot of ammunition and arms, and no one can stop them now. So basically, this is what the picture looks like, and these dark brown regions are the provincial capitals. Now, the important point to note is the actual focus of the discussion. Although it was Taliban, and it is very important, a lot of sites, a lot of people have already done this discussion of Taliban. But I believe I have to give you a different perspective, and it is not that purpose is not yet completed by now. We have not discussed about the people, the culture of Afghanistan, the beautiful state, the beautiful region that is. So again, some bits of information without trying to make it a prolonged discussion. Already it's been a prolonged discussion. So is Afghanistan all about hatred, war and bloodshed? The answer is no. Here is a picture of the blue mosque. Just see the side, see the beauty of this mosque. This mosque is one of the salient landmarks in Mazar-e-Sharif province of Afghanistan. So again, my favorite subject, that is geography. Some geographical features which also makes this a paradise to live in. We have seen Afghanistan in pictures or movies, even in Iron Man. We have seen lots of deserts, lots of mountains, extreme temperatures. That is just part. That is because of its geographical location. So we can see it consists of not only mountains, it consists of irrigated land, fertile river valleys, deep gorges, deserts, high plateaus, snow-covered mountains. The eastern portion we have already discussed, this Hindu Kush and Pamirs, and Naushak is the highest peak. Then we have various rivers which we have already discussed. This is the Morghab River. This is Amu Darya from Turkmenistan. This is Hari River. This is Farah River. This is the Helmand River. Helmand, remember, we have discussed, for famous for opium cultivation. Then this is the Kabul River. Kabul River is it is joining Indus River in Pakistan. Then we have important places like the Mazar-e-Sharif and Zaranj and Kandahar, Herat. So all these have their cultures of their own. And the starting slide, I had discussed some important landmarks in the form of icons also. So the principal rivers are here: Helmand and the Arghandab valleys. Yes, then the Kabul River, the Amod area, it was known as Oxus in ancient times. So lot of history, the Ghaznis and all those prehistoric times, Mongols. It is associated with a lot of culture, a lot of trade routes. Then we have the climate. Afghanistan's climate comprises a cold, snowy winter and a hot, dry summer. Extreme because it's a landlocked country. There is no oceanic influence. Some climatology involved. Extreme temperature changes occur from night to day. That is because there is less moisture, there's less formation of clouds, and during the daytime the sunlight, direct sunlight, falls on the land, making the temperatures very high. And during the night, because of lack of clouds, because of lack of moisture to trap the heat, it is straight away radiated into the night sky. That is why the nights become very cold. This is also a feature of most of the deserts. So that is an interesting fact. Then there are Jalalabad plains and all this. This dark green regions are the mountainous regions, and these slightly as the color pales out, these are the low-lying regions. Then resources. Resources we'll be discussing in much detail. It is not only important from the examination point of view, but people need to know that Afghanistan is not just a barren land. It is full of geography. It is full of good people. It is full of cultures and diversity. So the Afghanistan possesses a wealth of non-fuel minerals, which is value of more than 1 trillion US dollars. And of course, we have discussed rubies, emeralds, tourmalines, lapis lazuli, and there are recently a lot of important mines like copper, lithium, rare earth elements, cobalt, bauxite, uranium, chromium. They have been discovered. So now the basic mineral wealth. This took some time to prepare, but I have done my best. So why being so rich? In fact, in spite of being so rich, the mineral wealth is not accruing to Afghanistan economy. Why it has still to depend upon opium trade? Because of the various regions, the the isolations of plateaus, the marshy regions, the mountainous regions where accessibility is difficult, the inadequate logistics and the transport sector, and moreover, how can it be developed when there is so much insurgency, so much violence all around? This is not possible. But even after the Taliban has come to control in 2021, it has already come to notice that China has, which had earlier shown interest in the minerals of Afghanistan, it has further started talks with the commanding leaders of Afghanistan. Already we can see here I have given a demonstration of the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Now you can observe China is building. Of course, China wants to stick its ugly nose in every to just create tensions and troubles for India, and Pakistan is uh, under its control, and China has invested a lot in its development. And what does it get in return for development? That is control, more vigilance, more surveillance, more influence over that region. So similarly, this a China Pakistan important economic corridor that passes through Gilgit Baltistan and all the way to the Gwadar port, which is also built mostly by China. So the important thing is this passes through Karakoram range and Gilgit Baltistan, which is actually a part of India. So that is an impingement, that is a challenge to the sovereignty of the country, but we cannot do much about it because it is uncharted waters. It is still under Pakistan military control. But we are seeing how the cunningness of China, the impertinence it's just like a juvenile, behaving. It is clamoring for more influence, more territory. So basically, just leave that part. So potential value, all this, mostly we have the iron. This is potential value in $1 billion, $420.9 billion worth of iron ores, 274 that is copper. Then this is niobium, cobalt, AU is for gold, MO is for molybdenum, and others. If we discuss a bit of chemistry, you might have heard of this term, rare earth elements. Why they are called rare earth elements and why are they rare? Rare earth elements, where do they exist? If we go back to a periodic table, we go back again to school, there is something known as the F block elements. In F block, we discussed about the lanthanides, lanthanide series and the actinide series. So these rare earth elements belong to this F block elements, particularly the actinide, particularly these F block elements. And why they are known as rare earth? Not because they are rare or scarce in nature. Rather, they are distributed uniformly, more or less uniformly or evenly over the Earth's surface. So what happens is, if we want an ore to be economically feasible or exploitable, then we need a lot of material, lot of ore in one particular place. For example, if we consider an Hajigak iron deposit, or we consider iron deposits in our very own Jharkhand or Odisha or Chhattisgarh, a lot of those iron ore is situated in one particular area, one particular region. It is not distributed evenly. And since at that particular region it is available in huge quantity, it is profitable to exploit it and obtain the actual metal. But these rare earth elements such as yttrium and scandium and actinium and ytterbium, all these are rare earth because wherever they exist, they are in small quantity. So it does not, if one is at here, if one is located in India, small portion, other is located in another nation, so it does not become economically feasible to exploit or extract those minerals. That is why that is rare. And again, similarly, lot of copper, these important copper mines, mineral ore locations can be asked for exam point of view, and also for knowledge, for information for the general population. This is the Hajigak iron deposits, 1.8 billion tons of high quality iron ore, and this is Ainak copper mine. The four Chinese firms have plans of investing $4 billion, and the untapped CO deposits are estimated to be worth up to $88 billion. So this is again, recently these lithium deposits have become much in use. These are found in great quantity in Nuristan province, and a lot of countries, Pakistan, China and other nations, have laid their eyes on this vast mineral ore. Finally, some more things about diversity. Basically, this is a map about the basic locations, the ethnicities, the diversity which I was talking about. Although it has been difficult to take the census, but still, mostly we had discussed that the Hindu Kush mountains divided. The ethnicities can be divided on the basis of location, their presence, on the basis of topography. So basically, this part, the southwest and southern part, this blue, this purple, this is the Pashtun area, which also borders the Durand line with Pakistan. We have discussed the issue. This red area is the Balochis ethnicity, which borders the Balochistan province of Pakistan. Then here in the brown, Mazar-e-Sharif region, we have the Kyrgyz. Again, there in the yellow region, there is the Tajiks in proximity with the country Tajikistan. Then we have some green parts, this bordering Turkmenistan. They are Turkmen. They are called Turkmen. Then we have Hazara in the mountainous regions. They are majorly isolated regions. Then we had studied about lithium deposits in this Nuristan province. There is another ethnic race, people of ethnic race known as Nuristani. And again, here in the Wakhan corridor, there is a ethnic people or ethnic community known as Kyrgyz. Then this dark green is the Ismaili. So you can see the diversity, the different cultures. Some are living in plains, some are living in irrigated fertile lands, some are living in high mountains, some are living in valleys. So much diversity we need to, and not just opium or drug trade or the crescents or Taliban for that matter. So now we come to important prospect or important topic from the point of view of paper to GS paper to international relations from the point of view PSC. So how has India contributed? Afghanistan India relations, they are they have been progressed from 2001 and 2021, and not only neighbors with respect to geography or topography. If we see the map, if we see the map, this area, although this area is POK basically, that is why if we consider Jammu and Kashmir entirely part of India, there is a part of Wakhan corridor or this northeast extreme of Afghanistan which shares its boundary with India. So we also consider Afghanistan as one sharing its boundary with India. Then we also have been historical neighbors and share cultural ties through Bollywood and cricket. Of course, we know Rashid Khan, very famous these days. So now the diplomatic ties. Republic of India was the only South Asian country to recognize the Soviet-backed Democratic Republic of Pakistan, Afghanistan in 1980s. Though their relations were diminished through between towards 1990s because of various regions, the Soviet Union, Uncle Sam, and all those Mujahideen. But the major point is, despite the differences, India has always extended a helping hand to those who, who even though they don't have the capacity to reciprocate, but they have potential. They have good people, cooperating people who want to progress. That is why India is always ready to reach out to the people of Afghanistan. Then how India has helped Afghanistan. This is the parliament building which was built with the help of India. It was foundation stone was laid by Hamid Karzai and Manmohan Singh, who was the Prime Minister of India back then. Then Central Public Works Department of India was a consultant for the project, and it's a 100-acre plot in the famous Darul Aman section of Kabul, and it is next to the historical landmarks such as Amanullah Khan's palace. Then in case of transport, this is an image of the Chabahar port in Iran. Although it is a project in Iran, we have discussed that Afghanistan is a landlocked country. So, and Afghanistan, to reach Afghanistan, to conduct trade, to supply, export, import, to help Afghanistan various welfare, to provide it aid and other supplies, it cannot go through Pakistan. Of course, the northern region consists of mountainous areas, and it is also not feasible. So the only way available is the sea route, but for the sea route, the closest and the more feasible is through Iran. So Iran, here this is the Chabahar port. Then India has also helped Afghanistan build a Garland road. It has built a road from Ziranj to Delaram, and then it has built a Garland road that joins Herat, Delaram, Kandahar, Kabul, and Mazar-e-Sharif. So you can see India, how wisely it has tried to help Afghanistan and create avenues and opportunities for its connectivity. And further, if India strives to develop upon this, it can reach to other, it can establish communication and transport sectors further deep into Central Asian heartland, that is Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. So now, as this is a example of the Afghanistan-India Friendship Dam, Salma Dam. This is in the Herat province on the Hari River, which we have discussed in Chishti Sharif district of Herat province. 42 megawatts of power and provides irrigation for 75,000 hectares of farmland and stabilizing the existing irrigation of 35,000 hectares. So such lot of development India has helped Afghanistan. Then even humanitarian assistance also. India has supplied 1.1 million megatons of wheat to Afghanistan, and the Indira Gandhi Institute of Child Health is a 400 bed hospital, which is the main hospital in Afghanistan that exclusively caters to children from all across country. Annually approximately 3 lakh children, 2.5 lakh OPD and 50,000 IPD get treated at IGICH. Then capacity building, although capacity building is in the form of education, in the form of scholarships, more than 3,500 Afghans are undergoing various training programs, scholarships of 1,000 scholarships, 500 Indian technical and economic cooperation slots to Afghanistan annually. So these are so many sectors, so many points to note. So this is the diplomatic ties between India and Afghanistan. Next, now all the NATO forces, the ISAF, Uncle Sam, Norway, France, UK, all have left the country, but that doesn't mean that India is free. India is already surrounded. It is already flanked by two friendly neighbors, we know, Pakistan and China. So India further cannot do well with the destabilization or the instability in Afghanistan. So what can India do, and to in order to counter China, who is also striving for geopolitical gains in the region? So few points which I came across, which India can do, look forward to, and challenges and opportunities for India. So we have to first introduce that, barring a brief pause in the 1990s, India has historically enjoyed good ties with Afghanistan, which go back 1950 Treaty of Friendship, and since then the investment has run into over $3 billion, 3 billion US dollars, cultivated strong economic and defense ties with the Afghan government. So it's not only about aid, it's not only about friendship. We have to observe whenever we are asked an answer in the mains exam, or even for general information, we can start with this introduction. Then the talking to Taliban looks inevitable, even though it is arrogant and stubborn, but India is also has to look out for other threats such as the Haqqani network, a major faction within Taliban. So talks are imperative, or they are inevitable anyways. Then while talking Taliban to protect India's own interest, it also has to stabilize the legitimate government and security forces and work with the regional powers and the Central Asian powers, take the help of Russia, Iran. Then it should also urgently step up training Afghan forces, because Afghan forces have not only fled the country, they are also outmatched, they are outnumbered, and they are out weaponized, to say, in the face of Taliban assertion. Then there is a convergence of interest between the three, India and her three regional countries, China, Russia, and Iran, and none of them, none of the three, or none of the four of them, they can hope to live, or they can expect to live in peace while Taliban is knocking on their doors. Then Iran shares a long border with Afghanistan, and Iran has also shared some historic relationship with India, so it can take help for Iran also. Then Russia has cultivated links with the Taliban in recent years. India can engage Russia proactively also. Then again, although recently China has been there is a willingness, eagerness and willingness to counter China, whether it be by Quad, that is Australia, Japan, US and India, or whether by other means. So still, China has to be dealt with. China has to be dealt diplomatically, force is not an option. So these are some of the points which can be looked into by the Indian policy makers in order to make inroads or stabilize the government and tackle the larger problem of Taliban. So this brings us to the end of the lecture. So again, I have put in a quote of Khalid Hosseini, who's a famous Afghan American novelist. He wrote the novel Kite Runner. There is also a movie based on it. So basically, he says that Afghanistan, when we hear Afghanistan, from the starting of this presentation, I've been talking about when we hear about Afghanistan, we talk about opium wars, Taliban, insurgency, terrorism, jihad, mujahideen, and all. But it is much more than that. We have not observed, we, we have already always stayed in our comfort zones. We are bothered by only our own troubles, and we are also capable of creating troubles for ourselves. But you look beyond this. Now there is also danger, what was then and what will happen now. It is much more about the culture, the people who want to live with peace. So it is up to us to extend a helping hand, to consider them in perspective when we look at the larger problem of Pakistan. So with that, I would like to conclude. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and gained quite a bit. And with that, I I encourage you to ponder over a few points. You can let me know if I missed something, or if I should have covered more things in this. Rest. Just have a nice day. Jai Hind.